So our final speaker in this section of the evening is someone who most of you here probably know because he's a legend. It's the very Honourable Robin Chapple, MLC, who is your Greens WA Climate Change and Energy Spokesperson. Please welcome the Honourable Mr. Chapple.
I won't tell you what I mouthed to him just then. Unfortunately, Colin Barnett's not here tonight. So I thought I'd start off by actually repeating the statement that he made to the oil and gas industry about 6 months ago. When addressing that group of amateurist people, he said, "Bill Clinton got it wrong. It's not the economy stupid, it's oil, coal and gas stupid." That's your premier for you. Last night I attended a function where Norman Moore called on the mining industry to oppose vigorously the resource rent tax and other nasty things that were coming from Canberra. One wonders what he's talking about. What we need to realise is that last week the Maplecroft Climate Risk Report of 2009-2010 identified that Australia was now the second worst country in the world behind the United Arab Emirates for emitting climate change causing gases. We would have been number one had the United Emirates not started building desalinisation plants. Now that tells you something about desalinisation plants. Australia is now the second worst emitter of greenhouse gases. It is the highest emitter per capita. And if you look at where we're actually generating most of those emissions, WA as a state is most probably now, on a per capita basis, the worst state in the world for emitting CO2 emissions. Scott, I think it was, mentioned subsidy and how we need to deal with that. A conservative organisation last week, the International Energy Agency, in their World Energy Outlook 2010, came up with a couple of really good stats when they're saying that we need to encourage governments to bite the bullet and start getting into renewable energy. And they actually pointed to the subsidies that go around the world. 558 billion went in the year 2008-9 to the fossil fuel industry. In the same period, 37 billion went to renewables, and 20 billion went into biofuels. So if you actually look at what's going on, we really do need to turn it around at an international level. Now, I always believed that the philosophy was act locally, think globally. I think that's the norm. So yesterday I was in estimates and I asked Western Power, or the Office of Energy, what their position was on CO2 emissions. Do they know what they're emitting? And I'll paraphrase the answers. We do not collect that information on a state basis. And so I sort of said, why? And they said, because it's an international problem. And the quote was, that is mostly because the greenhouse issue is a global issue rather than a local one. Now that is the head of the Office of Energy in estimates yesterday. We do not have a specific target in this state. Our policy is simply to reduce emissions, to which I asked, well, if you don't know what your emissions are, how can you quantify what you're reducing? But we've got the policy. So we do have a problem in this state. We have a group of Luddites who have no understanding of what we need to be doing locally. So I won't speak any longer, I'll take some questions later on, but what we're doing, or trying to do, is, at least in WA, is introduce a gross feed-in tariff. Now for those who understand a little bit about feed-in tariffs, I'll leave you to maybe some questions a little bit later on to us and Sia. But in essence, what we've currently got is a net feed-in tariff, which means you get paid for any energy you produce over and above what you use. A gross feed-in tariff is you get paid for all the energy you produce, and thereby it is an economic investment. You can go to the banks, and you don't need government subsidies to do it. It stands alone as an operating system within the marketplace. The problem with subsidies are that when governments change, the subsidy belonged to the previous government and won't continue. You need energy production that is driven by industry and investment, not by big sort of one-off ministers standing beside $1 billion or $1 million or whatever else and saying, look what I'm doing, because it doesn't last. Thank you very much indeed for your time.